Something was wrong with the jump. Inside the high-tech chamber of Watchpoint Gibraltar, blue light spiraled violently around the teleportation core. Normally, Winston's experimental long-range transport system hummed with controlled precision, clean calculations, predictable energy flow, a stable destination. But this time, the machine screamed. Alarms erupted across the lab. Energy levels spiking, Winston shouted, furiously typing across holographic screens. His glasses reflected unstable data streams. That's impossible, and the coordinates were perfectly calibrated. Tracer stood inside the transport ring, chronal accelerator glowing softly against her chest. She grinned nervously. Winston, when you say spiking, do you mean the good kind of spiking, or the everyone hold on to something kind? The answer came instantly. A violent pulse of energy detonated from the core. The teleportation field warped, twisted, and then tore open like reality itself had been ripped apart. Abort! Abort the jump! Winston roared. But it was already too late. The chamber filled with blinding white light. And the Overwatch strike team vanished. High above New York City, the sky split open. For a fraction of a second, the clouds twisted unnaturally, forming a glowing fracture in the atmosphere. Lightning-like arcs of blue energy cracked across the skyline. Then 5 figures fell through the rift. They slammed onto the rooftop of a skyscraper. Metal panels bent beneath Winston's enormous weight as he rolled across the concrete. Genji landed gracefully in a crouch, his cybernetic blade already drawn. Soldier 76 recovered instantly, rifle raised as he scanned the horizon. Tracer tumbled across the rooftop before skidding to a stop. Right, she muttered, dusting off her jacket. That landing definitely wasn't part of the plan. Mercy descended last, stabilizing herself with a soft burst from her Valkyrie wings. The glowing rift above them sealed with a thunderous crack. Silence followed. Only the distant hum of city traffic filled the air. Winston slowly pushed himself upright, adjusting his glasses. This isn't Gibraltar. Below them stretched a massive city skyline, dense clusters of skyscrapers, digital billboards, and endless traffic weaving through illuminated streets. Genji tilted his head, scanning the environment. New York City, he said calmly. Soldier 76 narrowed his eyes, but not ours. The difference became obvious almost immediately. Massive holographic advertisements covered entire buildings, but they weren't selling technology or products. They were selling heroes. One billboard lit up the night sky with a patriotic display. A man in a bright cape floated triumphantly above the American flag. The words beneath him read, Homelander, America's greatest hero. Tracer leaned over the rooftop edge. Bit flashy for a hero, innit? Mercy activated her medical scanner, analyzing nearby broadcasts and digital signals. Information streamed across her visor. What I'm seeing doesn't make sense, she said quietly. Winston pulled out a portable surveillance drone and released it into the night sky. The small machine zipped through the city, tapping into public data networks. Within seconds, the drone began feeding footage back to his tablet. News reports, interviews, commercials. Every single one featured the same organization, Fought International. Genji watched silently as the videos played. Corporate press conferences, hero product endorsements, movie trailers starring real superheroes. He finally spoke. These heroes belong to a company. Mercy frowned. That's not the worst part. She rotated her display toward the others. Medical files, leaked research documents, biological reports. According to this data, their abilities aren't natural, Mercy explained. They were manufactured. Winston's eyes widened. Artificial enhancement? Mercy nodded slowly. A substance called Compound V. Soldier. 76 crossed his arms, staring down at the glowing billboards below. So they're not heroes. His voice hardened. They're products. A sudden roar echoed through the streets. The team looked up. A figure streaked across the sky like a living missile. Red capes snapping in the wind. He hovered above the city, glowing faintly in the night. The same face from the billboard. Homelander. The crowd below erupted in cheers. Phones raised. People chanting his name. But as Winston zoomed the drone camera closer, something felt wrong. Many of the faces cheering looked forced. Nervous. Some people clapped while carefully avoiding eye contact with the flying hero above them, like citizens pretending to love someone they feared. Tracer noticed it immediately. That's strange, she whispered. Mercy studied the crowd. They're celebrating him. Her voice softened uneasily. But they looked terrified. Up in the sky, Homelander floated silently above the glowing city. For a moment, his smile faded. His head tilted slightly. Something had disturbed the atmosphere earlier. Something powerful. His eyes flickered with faint red light. Homelander looked toward the distant skyscraper, where 5 unfamiliar figures stood watching the city. A slow grin spread across his face. Now that's interesting. Back on the rooftop, Winston continued analyzing incoming data. The deeper he dug into Vought's systems, the more disturbing the truth became. Corporate-controlled heroes. Government contracts. Civilian casualties, buried under propaganda. Genji folded his arms. This world has heroes. Soldier. 76 shook his head. No. His eyes remained fixed on the massive Homelander billboard, glowing across the skyline. This world has something pretending to be heroes. Tracer exhaled slowly. So what do we do? Winston looked down at the city below, then back at the sealed sky where the portal had once been. We find a way home, he said. But first, his voice lowered, we need to understand this world. High above the city, something suddenly moved through the clouds. A red cape. Watching, waiting, and slowly descending toward their rooftop. The city never slept. From the rooftop where the Overwatch team had landed hours earlier, New York looked almost identical to the one they knew. Traffic lights glowing, taxis weaving through crowded avenues, helicopters slicing across the skyline. But the deeper they looked, the more wrong it felt. Massive digital billboards didn't advertise technology, food, or tourism. They advertised heroes. Entire skyscrapers were covered in animated promotions. A smiling woman wielding a sword made of light. A speedster racing across a glowing track. And everywhere, the same symbol. Vought International. Tracer sat cross-legged near the rooftop ledge, watching a giant holographic commercial play across a neighboring building. The video showed Homelander flying through a battlefield, saving soldiers while dramatic music played in the background. Then the screen flashed the slogan, The 7, Protecting America. Tracer tilted her head. Blimey, do their heroes always come with advertisements? Soldier, 76, stood nearby, scanning the streets below through his tactical visor. Not heroes, he muttered. Brands. Across the rooftop, Mercy knelt beside a portable medical station she had assembled from her Valkyrie suit's equipment. Several holographic panels floated around her as biological data streamed across the screens. Winston approached, adjusting his glasses. "What have you found, Angela?" Mercy hesitated. "Something deeply troubling." She expanded one of the holographic displays. Medical scans appeared. Genetic structures, molecular breakdowns, chemical formulas. At the center of it all was a single compound. Compound V. "It's a biochemical enhancer," Mercy explained quietly. "But it's far more aggressive than anything we've ever studied." Genji stepped closer, his cybernetic eyes narrowing as he examined the data. "Artificial evolution," Mercy nodded. "Exactly." She zoomed into the molecular structure. "This compound rewrites the human genome. It triggers rapid cellular mutation and grants abilities that mimic superhuman traits: strength, flight, energy projection." Winston frowned. "That level of genetic rewriting should be wildly unstable." "It is," Mercy replied. "Which means these powers aren't natural. They're manufactured." Soldier, 76, crossed his arms. "So the heroes here are just lab experiments." Mercy sighed. "It appears that way." A loud roar of cheering suddenly echoed from the streets below. The team turned toward the noise. Hundreds of civilians had gathered in a plaza beneath a towering Vought Tower screen. The massive display flickered to life. Breaking news. A news anchor appeared, smiling brightly. Earlier today, Homelander was seen responding to an emergency situation downtown. Witnesses say the hero saved dozens of civilians after a construction crane collapsed. The screen switched to footage of Homelander effortlessly lifting twisted steel beams while reporters praised his bravery. The crowd below applauded, but Winston noticed something strange. Many people clapped, yet their faces remained tense, uneasy. Genji spoke quietly. "They cheer, but they do not trust." Tracer leaned against the railing. "Feels a bit forced, doesn't it?" Soldier. 76 watched the footage carefully. Then he noticed something. "Zoom in," he said. Winston adjusted the drone feed. The video slowed. Frame by frame, Homelander lifted the collapsed crane easily. But just before the rescue, he had been hovering nearby, watching, doing nothing. Soldier. 76's jaw tightened. He waited. Mercy frowned. Waited for what? For the cameras. The realization settled heavily over the group. This world didn't just tolerate corporate heroes. It depended on them. Their rescues were staged, their heroism packaged, their powers engineered. Genji turned toward Winston. If these heroes serve corporations instead of people, then this world's balance is fragile. Winston nodded slowly. That's why we must move carefully. Soldier, 76, disagreed immediately. Carefully? His voice hardened. This corporation is manufacturing superhumans and selling them like products. He gestured toward the massive Vought Tower dominating the skyline. That building is the center of it all. Tracer sighed. Jack, you're not thinking about charging in there, are you? He didn't answer. That silence said enough. Winston stepped forward. We cannot start a conflict in a world we barely understand. His tone was calm but firm. First, we gather information. Soldier. 76 stared at the tower, then finally looked away. Fine. But if these people are being controlled, his voice dropped. We stop it. High above the Earth, a Vought surveillance satellite slowly rotated. Its sensors scanned the atmosphere, tracking unusual energy signatures. Moments earlier, the satellite had detected something impossible. 5 unidentified superhuman energy sources had appeared over New York. None of them existed in Vaught's database. None were registered supes. The satellite transmitted its findings instantly, straight to Vought Tower. Inside the executive headquarters, a quiet meeting room overlooked the entire city. The walls were glass, the atmosphere calm, controlled. At the head of the table sat Stan Edgar, CEO of Vought International, a man known for his absolute composure. One of Vaught's analysts rushed into the room. Sir, we've detected something unusual. Edgar didn't look up from his tablet. Define unusual. The analyst activated a holographic display. 5 energy signatures appeared above Manhattan. Unknown supes operating in New York, the analyst explained. They're not registered with Vought. Edgar finally raised his eyes. Independent heroes? The analyst hesitated. We've checked every database. He swallowed. They don't exist. The room fell silent. Edgar studied the data carefully. Unknown heroes, operating without contracts, without authorization, without control. His expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened slightly. After a moment, he spoke. His voice was quiet, measured. Find out who these heroes are. The holographic screen displayed the silhouettes of the Overwatch team standing on the rooftop. Edgar folded his hands. And who owns them? Far across the city, 5 heroes from another universe had no idea that the most powerful corporation on Earth had just begun hunting them. In a dimly lit basement somewhere beneath New York City, a laptop screen flickered with surveillance footage. The grainy video showed 5 unfamiliar figures moving across a Manhattan rooftop. The footage was shaky, captured from a hacked traffic camera, but the silhouettes were unmistakable. One of them was a massive armored gorilla. Another moved faster than the camera could properly track. A third carried a rifle with military precision. And one shimmered with glowing mechanical wings. Frenchie leaned closer to the screen, rubbing his chin. Well, he muttered in a thick accent, that is definitely not normal, no? Beside him, Mother's Milk folded his arms. Vaught's been making new soups again? Maybe, Frenchie said, but these ones, they're not in the system. Across the room, Huey Campbell sat quietly, staring at the screen. The footage replayed again, and again. But the person standing behind him wasn't watching with curiosity. Billy Butcher was watching with suspicion. Butcher leaned against the table, chewing slowly on a toothpick as the video looped once more. His eyes narrowed. Well, he muttered. Looks like Vaught's cooked up a new batch of freaks. Mother's Milk frowned. You sure about that? Butcher nodded toward the screen. Superpowers. Matching outfits. Dramatic rooftop entrances. He shrugged. Smells like Vought. Huey spoke up quietly. But they're not in any Vought database. Butcher gave him a sideways glance. Exactly. He leaned forward. And that's what worries me. Hours later, Huey stood alone on a subway platform. The underground station buzzed with commuters rushing between trains. The noise of screeching rails echoed through the tunnels. Huey pretended to read something on his phone. But his eyes were scanning the crowd. He had tracked one of the mysterious heroes here. A A young woman wearing orange leggings and a brown bomber jacket stood near the platform edge. Her short hair bounced slightly as she looked around with wide, curious eyes. Tracer. She looked oddly cheerful for someone in hiding. Huey whispered quietly into the microphone hidden in his collar. I found one of them. Butcher's voice crackled through the earpiece. Which one? The fast one. Butcher snorted. Brilliant observation, Huey. Tracer stretched her arms casually, glancing around the station. She looked relaxed. Friendly, even. Not like any soup Huey had seen before. He expected arrogance, confidence, maybe even cruelty. But instead, she waved awkwardly when someone accidentally bumped into her. Sorry, she said quickly. The stranger looked confused. Huey frowned. That wasn't normal. Then, the ground trembled. At first it was subtle, a faint vibration running through the subway platform. Then, the tremor intensified. The concrete beneath everyone's feet shook violently. Passengers began looking around nervously. What was that? A loud cracking noise echoed through the tunnel. Tracer's expression changed instantly. She turned toward the tracks. That's not good. The ceiling above the tracks suddenly collapsed. Chunks of concrete and metal crashed onto the rails. The train rushing toward the station screeched violently as the driver slammed the brakes. Passengers screamed. The train derailed halfway into the platform. Metal screamed as the front cars twisted against the broken tracks. The entire station filled with dust. Chaos erupted. People ran in every direction. And in the middle of it all, Tracer vanished. Huey blinked. Then suddenly, wind rushed past him. A blur of orange streaked across the platform. Tracer reappeared beside a trapped commuter pinned beneath a fallen steel beam. Hold on, love. She activated her chronal accelerator. In a flash of blue light, she lifted the beam just long enough to pull the civilian free. Then she blinked again, and again, and again. Each movement was impossibly fast. Tracer raced through the collapsing station, pulling people away from falling debris, dragging injured passengers toward safety. Within seconds, she had evacuated half the platform. Huey stared in disbelief. She wasn't posing. She wasn't waiting for cameras. She was just helping people. At one point, she even stumbled while catching her breath. Sorry I'm late, she said to a terrified mother clutching her child. I'm still getting used to this place. Huey froze. That sentence hit him harder than the collapsing subway. Sorry. Late. No cameras. No publicity. Just genuine concern. Something about it felt completely different. The dust slowly settled. Emergency crews rushed into the station. Tracer stepped back into the shadows before anyone could question her. Moments later, she vanished completely. Huey stood there in stunned silence. His earpiece crackled. Butcher's voice returned. What happened down there? Huey hesitated. They saved people. A pause. Butcher, Huey continued quietly. They didn't wait for cameras. They just helped. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Butcher finally spoke. His tone was colder, more suspicious than ever. Anyone can play hero for 5 minutes, Huey. Back in their hidden headquarters, Butcher grabbed a shotgun from the weapons rack. He loaded a shell into the chamber with a sharp click. Vots trained their pets well. He slung the weapon over his shoulder. His eyes hardened. Either they're heroes, the shotgun snapped shut, or they're just better actors. And Billy Butcher intended to find out which one. The robbery lasted less than 30 seconds. Inside a small Manhattan bank, masked gunmen shouted orders while terrified civilians lay face down on the floor. One robber nervously waved an assault rifle toward the hostages. "Everyone stay down. Nobody move." Another man struggled to shove cash into a bag. Outside, distant sirens echoed through the streets, but the criminals knew something the civilians didn't. Police wouldn't arrive fast enough. And even if a soup showed up, it would probably be for the cameras. One of the hostages began crying. "Please, please don't hurt us." The lead robber turned toward her, irritated. "Shut up." He raised his weapon. Then suddenly, clang. The sound was sharp, metallic. The robber froze. Slowly, he looked down. The barrel of his rifle had been sliced clean in half. Before he could even process what had happened, a silver flash appeared behind him. Genji Shimada stood silently in the center of the bank lobby. His cybernetic armor reflected the fluorescent lights overhead. His blade rested calmly at his side. The criminals stared in stunned disbelief. One of them whispered, "What the hell is that?" Genji's voice was calm. "Violence will not bring you what you seek." The men recovered from their shock quickly, and they opened fire. Bullets tore through the air. The hostages screamed, but Genji didn't move away. He stepped forward, and his sword flashed. Clang, clang, clang. Every bullet was deflected. Metal ricocheted across the walls as sparks erupted from Genji's blade. His movements were precise, controlled, almost effortless. To the terrified civilians watching, it looked impossible. One robber tried to escape toward the back door. Genji vanished. In a blur of motion, he appeared directly in front of him. The blade moved once. The robber's gun split apart like paper. The man collapsed, trembling. Within seconds, every weapon in the room had been destroyed. Genji sheathed his sword. Silence returned to the bank. He turned toward the civilians. "You are safe now." Someone in the crowd slowly raised a phone and began recording. 2 hours later, the video had gone viral across news channels, across social media, across every VOT monitoring system. The footage replayed again and again. A cybernetic warrior calmly deflecting an entire hail of gunfire. No hesitation, no arrogance, no branding, just efficiency. And something else. Discipline. Inside Vought Tower, a massive screen played the footage on loop. Several executives watched nervously, but the man sitting at the head of the room looked fascinated. Homelander leaned back in his chair. The room was silent except for the sound of ricocheting bullets from the video. Over and over and over. Finally, Homelander spoke. "Play that part again." The assistant rewound the footage. Genji deflected the bullets once more. Homelander leaned forward slightly. His eyes narrowed. "That's not luck," he said quietly. "That's training." The room remained silent. One executive cleared his throat. "Sir, we believe he may be one of the unidentified vigilantes detected yesterday." Homelander slowly turned his head. "Unidentified." The word sounded strange coming from him. His voice lowered. "Why do I not know these heroes?" No one answered immediately. Stan Edgar sat calmly across the table. Completely composed, he folded his hands. They appear to be independent vigilantes. Homelander's gaze shifted toward him. Independent. The word hung in the air. Homelander smiled faintly. But it wasn't a friendly smile. "That's funny." He stood up slowly. Because in Homelander's world, no superhuman existed without Vought knowing, and more importantly, without his approval. High above the city, Homelander floated in silence. Wind rushed around his cape as he hovered miles above the skyline. Far below him, the lights of Manhattan glowed like a living circuit board. But Homelander wasn't looking at the city. He was looking at the tablet in his hand, the same footage of Genji. He watched the deflection again and again. His smile slowly faded. Something about it irritated him. Not the skill. Not the power. The confidence. Genji had fought without fear, without hesitation, without even looking impressed with himself. Homelander whispered softly to himself. Interesting. In Homelander's world, people feared him. They worshipped him. But no one stood calmly in the middle of gunfire like that. Unless they believed they were untouchable. And Homelander hated competition. He crushed the tablet in his hand. Plastic shattered instantly. Homelander turned toward the distant skyline. His eyes scanned the city, searching, listening. His enhanced hearing picked up distant conversations, heartbeats, traffic, helicopters. Somewhere in this massive city, those unknown heroes were hiding. Homelander slowly began descending toward Manhattan. A smile returned to his face. But this one looked far more dangerous. Let's see how heroic they really are. And far below him, the Overwatch team had no idea that the most powerful and unstable hero on this world was coming to meet them personally. Fire consumed the upper floors of the apartment building. Black smoke poured from shattered windows as flames spread through their structure. The night sky above Manhattan glowed orange, while panicked civilians gathered on the streets below. Sirens wailed in every direction. Inside the collapsing building, the Overwatch team moved quickly. Tracer blinked across a burning hallway, reappearing beside a trapped family. "All right, one at a time, yeah?" she said, grabbing the youngest child and blinking back toward the stairwell. Mercy hovered near the ceiling, guiding people through falling debris. "This way. Stay close." Her staff glowed as she stabilized an injured man struggling to breathe. Below them, Winston lifted a fallen support beam with a strained roar. "Go! Quickly!" Civilians rushed past him as concrete cracked under the building's shifting weight. Genji moved like a ghost through the flames, slicing through blocked doorways and clearing escape routes. And outside the building, Soldier 76 coordinated the evacuation. "Fire crews arriving in 2 minutes," he said into his comms. "Tracer, how many left inside?" "About 6, she replied between blinks. "And one very angry cat." 76 almost smiled. Then the air suddenly changed. A powerful gust of wind swept through the street. Civilians looked upward. At first, they cheered, because floating above the burning building was the most famous hero in the world. Homelander. His cape billowed dramatically as he hovered in the firelit sky. Cameras from nearby reporters immediately pointed upward. "Homelander has arrived," someone shouted. But Homelander wasn't looking at the building. He was watching the heroes inside it. Inside the burning hallway, Genji paused. His head tilted slightly. Something powerful had just arrived. Very powerful. But it didn't feel like a protector. It felt wrong. "Winston," Genji said quietly through the comms. "We are no longer alone." Outside, Homelander slowly descended toward the street. People cheered louder. Phones rose into the air to capture the moment. But Homelander didn't wave. He didn't pose. His eyes remained fixed on the building. The front wall suddenly exploded outward as Winston burst through carrying two civilians. The massive gorilla gently set them down. The crowd gasped. Homelander's smile returned. Well, he hovered closer. That's new. Winston turned and saw him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Two completely different visions of power stared at each other. Homelander tilted his head slightly. A talking gorilla. His smile widened. This city just keeps getting more interesting. Tracer blinked out of the building, carrying the last child. She froze when she saw Homelander. "Oh, brilliant," she muttered. Soldier 76 stepped forward immediately. His rifle remained lowered, but ready. "Building's still unstable," 76 said firmly. "People inside come first." Homelander ignored the instruction. Instead, he slowly floated closer to the team. His eyes studied each of them carefully. The armor, the weapons, the discipline. Then he asked the question, "Who exactly are you supposed to be?" No one answered immediately. Finally, Winston spoke. "We're here to help." Homelander chuckled softly. "That's adorable." His eyes moved toward the burning building behind them. "You know, saving people without a contract is technically illegal in this city." Tracer blinked beside Soldier. 76. "Wait, what?" Homelander's smile widened. "This is my city." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And you didn't ask permission." The air grew tense. Genji stepped forward slightly. His voice remained calm. "True heroes do not require permission." Homelander's expression changed instantly. Not anger. Something more dangerous. Amusement. "Oh, I like this one." His eyes locked onto Genji. "You think you're a hero?" Soldier. 76 stepped forward. "That's exactly what we are." The crowd watching nearby began whispering nervously. Something about this conversation felt wrong. Homelander floated lower. His boots touched the street. "Let me explain how this works," he said slowly. "In this world, heroes work for Vought." He pointed toward the team. "You don't." The flames behind them roared louder as part of the building collapsed inward. Still, Homelander didn't move to help. Winston noticed. "You're not here to rescue anyone," Winston said quietly. Homelander smiled. "I'm here to meet the competition." Then, his eyes suddenly glowed red. Without warning, he fired. A blazing beam of heat vision tore through the air. Genji reacted instantly. His sword flashed upward. Clang. The beam struck the blade. Energy exploded across the street as the deflection redirected the blast into the burning building behind them. Concrete shattered. Cars exploded. Genji slid backwards several meters from the force. The crowd screamed. Smoke filled the street. For the first time in years, Homelander blinked in surprise. Someone had just blocked his heat vision. Genji steadied himself, sword still raised. His voice was calm, but serious. "You are unstable." Homelander slowly floated upward again. The surprise faded from his face, replaced by something darker. Excitement. "Well now." He cracked his neck slightly. "This just got interesting." Soldier. 76 raised his rifle. Tracer's accelerator flared to life. Winston stepped forward protectively, and Genji lifted his blade once more. High above the burning city, Homelander smiled wider than he had in years. Because for the first time in this universe, someone could actually fight back. And Homelander absolutely hated that. By morning, the story had already been rewritten. The burning building from the night before still smoldered in downtown Manhattan. Fire crews worked through the wreckage while news helicopters circled overhead. But the footage being broadcast across the world didn't focus on the rescue. It focused on the fight. Every channel replayed the same moment. Homelander hovering above the street, Genji deflecting the heat vision. Cars exploding, concrete collapsing. The narrative had already been decided, and it was spreading faster than the truth. Inside a small abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city, the Overwatch team gathered around a portable monitor Winston had set up. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Breaking developments after last night's catastrophic incident in Manhattan. Tracer leaned forward, arms crossed. All right, let's see how badly they've misunderstood everything. The footage switched to a dramatic angle of Homelander firing his heat vision. But the video had been edited. The part showing Genji deflecting the beam to protect civilians was missing. Instead, the clip cut directly to the explosion. The building collapsing. Cars igniting. The anchor continued. Authorities confirm that a group of unidentified superhumans, believed to be rogue supes, engaged in violent conflict with Homelander during a rescue operation. Tracer blinked. Wait, what? Another commentator appeared on screen. These individuals are not registered with Vought International and are considered extremely dangerous. Mercy's expression darkened. They're controlling the narrative. The footage continued. Sources within Vought report that these rogue supes may be responsible for multiple unauthorized interventions across New York over the past 48 hours. Images flashed across the screen. Tracer rescuing civilians in the subway. Genji stopping the bank robbery. But the clips were framed differently now. Suspicious. Threatening. The words "unknown superhuman activity" appeared in bold red text. Soldier. 76 watched silently. His jaw tightened. I've seen this tactic before. Winston looked toward him. Propaganda. 76 nodded. Control the media. Control the story. The broadcast suddenly switched to a live press conference. Vought Tower filled the screen. Stan Edgar stood behind the podium. Completely calm. Completely composed. Good morning, he said. As you've all seen, New York has experienced a concerning rise in unregistered superhuman activity. Reporters raised their hands immediately. Mr. Edgar, are these individuals connected to Vought? No, Edgar replied smoothly. These individuals are rogue supes operating outside regulatory oversight. He paused just long enough to let the words sink in. Without accountability, without contracts, and without regard for public safety. Another reporter shouted, but witnesses say they were rescuing civilians. Edgar nodded thoughtfully. Intent does not excuse recklessness. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the explosion from the previous night. The edited version. Interfering with trained heroes during active rescue operations can create catastrophic consequences. The room murmured. Edgar continued calmly. For the safety of our citizens, Vought will be assisting federal authorities in locating these individuals. He folded his hands and bringing them into custody. Inside the warehouse, the team stared at the screen in silence. Tracer slowly leaned back. Right. She pointed at the television. So, we save people, and suddenly we're the bad guys? Mercy sighed quietly. This corporation controls the entire public narrative. Winston rubbed his chin thoughtfully. They're protecting their authority. Soldier, 76 scoffed. No. He looked directly at the screen. They're protecting their monopoly. The broadcast resumed. The anchor spoke again. In response to the growing threat posed by these rogue soups, Vought International has announced a special response initiative. A new graphic appeared on the screen. 5 silhouettes appeared. Tracer, Genji, Winston, Mercy, Soldier, Sesdesmit Sessi, each labeled with the same title, Unidentified Rogue Superhuman. Tracer stared at the screen. You've got to be kidding me. The anchor continued. Vought has authorized a reward for any information leading to the identification or capture of these individuals. A number appeared beneath the images. $50 million. The warehouse fell silent. Mercy slowly looked up. They've put a bounty on us. Genji spoke quietly. A clever tactic. Winston nodded. They are turning the entire world against us. Outside the warehouse, distant police sirens echoed through the city. Soldier, 76 loaded a magazine into his rifle. Well, now things just got complicated. Tracer glanced back at the screen. Millions of people were now watching the same broadcast. Millions of people now believed they were dangerous. Criminals, villains. And somewhere in Vought Tower, Stan Edgar calmly turned off the press conference feed. One of his assistants approached. Sir, the public response is already shifting in our favor. Edgar nodded slightly. And the new heroes. The assistant checked the data. They've gone dark. Edgar allowed himself a small smile. They won't stay hidden forever. Outside the tower, high above the clouds, Homelander floated silently, watching the city below, watching the news broadcasts spreading across every screen. His smile slowly returned. Because now, the entire world was hunting the Overwatch team, and Homelander planned to be the one who caught them first. The conference room inside Vought Tower felt colder than usual. A massive glass wall overlooked the skyline of New York, but the view did little to calm the tension inside the room. 7 chairs surrounded the polished black table. Only 5 were occupied, and every one of them had just watched the same footage. Overwatch, the mysterious newcomers. The fight with Homelander, the viral clips that had begun spreading across the world. For most of the public, the narrative was already clear, but inside this room, things were far more complicated. A-Train was the first to break the silence. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded tightly. All right, hold up. He pointed at the screen where Genji's deflection replayed again. You're telling me that Ninja Robot just blocked Homelander's heat vision? No one answered immediately. Queen Maeve stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. A-Train shook his head. That's not normal. Across the table, the Deep nervously adjusted his gloves. Well, maybe it was some kind of trick. Maeve finally spoke. That wasn't a trick. Her voice was calm, but there was something uneasy in it. She had seen real combat before, and the way those newcomers moved, that wasn't marketing. That wasn't acting. That was training. Real training. At the far end of the table, Black Noir sat silently. He hadn't moved once during the entire meeting, but on the screen in front of him, multiple combat simulations ran simultaneously. Thermal scans, movement analysis, combat probabilities. Every frame of Genji's sword movement had been broken down into data. Black Noir slowly reached for one of his knives. He began sharpening it methodically. The quiet metallic scrape echoed softly through the room. A-Train glanced toward him. That guy gives me the creeps. But no one laughed. The door to the conference room opened. Stan Edgar entered calmly. Every member of the Seven straightened slightly. Even Homelander. Stan Edgar approached the table without urgency. Good afternoon. No one greeted him back. Edgar pressed a button on the remote in his hand. The screen changed. Now it displayed the 5 targets. Winston, Tracer, Genji, Mercy, Soldier, Sister Smith Sacy. These individuals, Edgar said calmly, are now classified as hostile rogue soups. A-Train frowned. So, what exactly do you want us to do? Edgar looked around the table. Bring them in. The Deep nodded quickly. Alive, right? Yes. Edgar's eyes shifted briefly toward Homelander. If possible. Queen Maeve leaned back in her chair. Her gaze remained on the screen. They saved people, she said quietly. The room went silent. Edgar responded without hesitation. They interfered with VOD operations. Maeve's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not the same thing. A faint tension filled the room. But Edgar didn't argue. Instead, he simply replied, Public safety must remain under professional oversight. Maeve didn't respond, but she clearly wasn't convinced. A-Train suddenly stood up. You realize what this looks like, right? He pointed at the screen again. These guys show up out of nowhere, and suddenly everyone online is talking about them. He shook his head. They're trending. The word hung in the air. Trending. In Vaught's world, popularity was power, and A-Train hated competition. I'm not letting some mystery team steal our spotlight. Across the table, Homelander finally spoke. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. You're not bringing them in. Everyone looked at him. Edgar tilted his head slightly. Excuse me? Homelander stood slowly. His cape shifted behind him as he moved toward the screen. He stared at the image of Genji. You saw the footage. His eyes glowed faintly. They're not ordinary soups. Edgar watched him carefully. That's precisely why we must control them. Homelander smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. No. He turned toward the rest of the 7. You're not capturing them. A-Train frowned. Then what are we doing? Homelander's expression darkened. We're testing them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Maeve crossed her arms. What does that mean? Homelander's eyes flickered with excitement. It means I want to see how strong they really are. Edgar's voice remained calm. This is not a game, Homelander. Homelander looked back at him. No. His smile widened. It's a message. He pointed toward the screen. These heroes showed up in my city. His voice dropped lower. They embarrassed me in front of the entire world. No one spoke. Because they all understood something. Homelander wasn't thinking about strategy, or corporate interests, or public safety. This was personal. Very personal. Homelander turned toward the window overlooking New York. Far below, the city lights flickered endlessly. Somewhere out there, the Overwatch team was hiding, and Homelander intended to find them. Not as a corporate mission, not as a rescue operation, but as a demonstration. His eyes glowed faintly again. I'm going to break them. Behind him, Black Noir finally stood up from his chair. The sharpening knife slid quietly back into its sheath. The hunt had officially begun. And this time, it wouldn't be just Homelander coming for them. Rain fell steadily over the abandoned district. Broken streetlights flickered above empty roads, while distant thunder rolled across the city skyline. The warehouse district had long since been forgotten by the public, which made it the perfect place to disappear. Inside an old shipping depot, faint light glowed through cracked windows. Mercy knelt beside an injured construction worker, carefully adjusting the settings on her medical staff. "Easy now," she said gently. "You're going to be all right." Golden energy pulsed softly from the device, stabilizing the man's breathing. Nearby, Winston monitored a holographic scanner projecting across the floor. "These injuries match the subway collapse earlier today," he said. Tracer leaned against a rusted pillar, watching the door. Poor bloke got caught under falling concrete. She glanced toward Mercy and smiled faintly. "Lucky we found him first." Genji stood silently near the entrance, his visor glowing faintly through the dim room. Every sound outside echoed through his cybernetic sensors. Footsteps, rain hitting metal, wind shifting broken glass, and something else. Someone was approaching. Across the street, a black van rolled to a stop. Inside, 4 figures watched the building through rain-streaked windows. Billy Butcher sat in the front seat, arms folded, eyes locked on the warehouse. Right then, he muttered, "That's them." Huey shifted nervously beside him. "You're sure?" Butcher nodded. "Same group from the news." Mother's Milk leaned forward from the back seat. "And if they're just another Vought experiment?" Butcher opened the glove compartment. Inside rested a shotgun. "We find out." Frenchie adjusted the small drone hovering near his shoulder. Perhaps we observe first." Butcher ignored him. His gaze remained fixed on the warehouse. Because something about these newcomers bothered him. Soups didn't hide in abandoned buildings. Soups didn't treat injured civilians in secret. Soups didn't avoid cameras, which meant one of 2 things. Either they were the greatest actors Vought had ever created, or they weren't Voughts at all. Butcher stepped out of the van. "Let's go say hello." Inside the warehouse, Genji spoke quietly. "We have visitors." "Soldier." 76 immediately raised his rifle. "Numbers?" 4. Tracer pushed off the pillar. "Well, that's suspicious." The heavy warehouse door slowly creaked open. Rain poured in as 4 figures stepped inside. Billy Butcher led the group, shotgun resting casually on his shoulder. Huey followed behind him. Mother's Milk and Frenchie spread out slightly, watching every movement in the room. The tension was immediate. Soldier 76 aimed his rifle directly at Butcher. "Stop right there." Butcher didn't stop walking. "Relax, Captain America." His eyes moved across the room, taking everything in. The equipment, the injured civilian, Mercy's glowing staff, and the way the team had positioned themselves protectively around the wounded man. Not aggressively. Protectively. Interesting. Mercy stood slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she said calmly. Huey's eyes widened. He wasn't staring at Mercy. He was staring at the injured worker behind her. The man's breathing had stabilized. His wounds were visibly healing, and Mercy was speaking to him gently. "You're safe now." She adjusted the medical field again. "Just rest." Huey blinked. Soups didn't talk like that. Soups didn't kneel beside injured civilians like doctors. They showed up for cameras, for contracts, for attention. But Mercy looked like she genuinely cared. Huey whispered quietly. Wait. Butcher ignored him. His eyes moved towards Soldier. 76. You lot caused quite the mess yesterday. 76 didn't lower his weapon. You followed us. Butcher shrugged. Was curious. Tracer stepped forward slightly. Curious enough to bring a shotgun? Butcher smirked. Experience taught me never to trust a soup. The word hung in the air. Genji tilted his head slightly. You believe we are like the others. Butcher laughed softly. Oh, I know exactly what you are. His eyes narrowed. Corporate weapons. Winston shook his head. That's not who we are. Butcher raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? He gestured toward the television, still playing muted news footage in the corner. They say otherwise. Huey slowly stepped forward. His eyes were still locked on Mercy. You helped that guy. Mercy looked at him. Yes. No cameras, Huey said. No reporters. She nodded. He needed help. Huey turned toward Butcher. Billy. Butcher didn't respond immediately, because he had been studying them carefully. Their posture, their behavior, their discipline. They weren't posing. They weren't bragging. They weren't threatening civilians. They were helping, which made absolutely no sense. Butcher lowered his shotgun slightly. He spoke quietly. If these people are real heroes. The words felt strange, even leaving his mouth. He glanced toward the television again, where Vought continued labeling them as rogue soups. Then he looked back at the Overwatch team. Then this world's about to get very complicated. Outside the warehouse, high above the storm clouds, a distant red glow flickered across the sky. Two burning eyes watched the building from miles away. Homelander had found them, and this time, he wasn't coming alone. The warehouse had been converted into a temporary lab. Winston's scanners hummed softly as Mercy carefully examined several vials of a glowing, viscous liquid she had retrieved from a discarded Vought storage container. The bright green substance sloshed inside the glass containers, almost alive, pulsating faintly under her touch. This isn't just enhancing abilities, Mercy murmured, her brow furrowing. She adjusted her visor and projected a microscopic view onto the holographic display hovering before the team. It's rewriting the body, altering the very DNA, but the side effects, they're catastrophic. Tracer leaned over the projection, her usual cheerful tone replaced with unease. Catastrophic? How bad? Mercy's hands shook slightly as she highlighted cellular decay, spontaneous tissue mutations, and extreme psychological instability in test subjects. It's addictive, uncontrollable in the long term, and sometimes lethal. The so-called heroes are not born. They are manufactured, and the process is brutal. Genji studied the display quietly, his cybernetic systems processing the data instantly. These are not enhancements in the true sense of heroism. They are weapons, puppets, designed for obedience. Soldier. 76 gritted his teeth. So Vought isn't just controlling the public perception. They're controlling lives. Entire lives. Innocent people exposed to this compound, manipulated into violence, fame, or worse. Tracer's fists clenched. We can't just sit here. People are being experimented on and used as toys. Children, adults, whoever they pick next. Winston paced near the scanners. We've observed them in action. Even the most publicized members of the Seven. They're unstable because of this. The world needs to know the truth. but exposing it will bring consequences. Mercy's voice hardened. Consequences? The real consequence is that lives are being ruined every day. That's what matters. Soldier. 76 nodded, glancing at the glowing vials. We've made a choice when we became heroes. Protecting people isn't optional. If this world allows a corporation to weaponize its citizens, we can't stand by. Tracer's eyes sparkled with determination, her usual playful grin gone. Then it's decided. We're going to take this fight to Vought. Expose them. Stop the next batch before more people get hurt. Genji's tone was calm but resolute. We have to act carefully. These individuals are powerful, trained, and unpredictable. But if our goal is truth, we cannot allow fear of retaliation to stop us. Mercy carefully sealed the vials in a secure case. We'll need proof, data, samples, anything to show the world what Compound 5 truly does. Winston frowned. And yet, we're still in their world. If they discover us, if Homelander or the others find these vials before we can act, it could be catastrophic. Soldier. 76 looked each team member in the eye. We knew this wouldn't be simple. Standing up for truth rarely is. But if we delay, innocent lives will continue to be at risk. Tracer rubbed her hands together. So, we go public. We expose Vought, and we make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Mercy nodded. We've seen the horrors firsthand, and now we've seen the power they wield to cover it up. It's bigger than just them. It's an entire system built on control, fear, and propaganda. We have a responsibility to challenge it. Genji sheathed his sword, his cybernetic systems glowing softly. The path will be dangerous. They will come after us. And it won't be just the 7. The entire organization will mobilize to protect its secret. Soldier, 76 adjusted his visor. Then we prepare. We gather the evidence. We strategize. And we strike with precision. But we can't hesitate. The moment we do, they'll bury the truth and destroy anyone who stands in their way. Tracer's voice softened, almost a whisper. And we can't let fear stop us. Not now. Not ever. Winston's eyes scanned the holographic data one last time. The implications. If the public sees this, it could destabilize the world's perception of heroes entirely. There will be chaos, and we'll be at the center of it. Mercy looked at the team, her expression determined. Then we make the choice anyway, because sometimes doing the right thing means walking into the storm. The team stood in silence for a moment, each of them absorbing the weight of the decision. Outside, the rain had turned into a steady downpour, tapping rhythmically against the cracked windows, mirroring the tension building inside. Tracer finally broke the silence, her voice firm. All right then, let's do it. Let's show this world what heroes really are. And in that moment, the warehouse felt smaller, but the world outside suddenly seemed infinite. Somewhere beyond the city, cameras, satellites, and surveillance systems, Vaught's eyes were watching. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing across the skyline. High above, in the clouds, a familiar figure paused mid-flight. Homelander had learned of Overwatch's presence. And now, with their decision made to expose Vought, he was coming for them. The real fight was about to begin. The night was quiet. Too quiet. From a distance, the city lights of New York blinked in the rain, oblivious to the danger brewing in its shadows. In the abandoned warehouse, Overwatch had barely begun organizing their evidence against Vought. Mercy scanned the glowing vials of Compound 5. Winston coordinated emergency evacuation routes. And Soldier 76 mapped tactical defense points. Tracer paced, fingers tapping nervously. Then, the first sign arrived, the hum of jet engines slicing through the stormy air. Winston's sensors flared. Multiple aerial units, approaching at high speed. Military grade. Mercy's eyes widened. And enhanced soups. Tracer's grin disappeared. So, they're not just sending goons. They're sending their best. Within moments, the night sky erupted in movement. Figures streaked through the air with unnatural speed, energy shields activated, and heavy artillery rattled the streets. Black-clad soldiers in tactical exosuits advanced from the alleys, weapons trained precisely on the team's position. Winston barked orders. Civilians first. Evacuate. I'll hold the line. He activated a kinetic barrier, forming a shimmering dome around the building. Inside, the injured construction worker and several nearby residents were quickly escorted out through hidden passages. Soldier 76 ducked behind a steel beam, rifle firing bursts at incoming soups. Each shot found its mark, but for every opponent that fell, two more took their place. Genji moved like a shadow, deflecting bullets and knives alike with his sword. He darted between soldiers and enhanced soups, striking precise blows that incapacitated without killing. Stay calm, focus on defense and civilian safety, he instructed, moving alongside Winston's energy shield. Tracer zipped through the chaos, her blink abilities allowing her to disorient the attackers, snatching hostages from danger and tossing them behind protective barriers. "Move it, love," she shouted, guiding a small group to safety. Despite the team's coordination, the assault escalated. A supremely enhanced operative launched into the warehouse, smashing through reinforced walls as if they were paper. Mercy quickly healed the injured, her energy flares keeping the worst of the damage at bay. But each moment stretched thin the team's resources. Meanwhile, Vaught's surveillance feeds were live streaming the assault to the entire city. Screens in Times Square, corporate offices, and living rooms around New York displayed the battle as it unfolded, complete with dramatic captions branding Overwatch as rogue soups resisting lawful intervention. But something unexpected happened. As the battle raged, people began to notice, not the explosions, not the lasers or the chaos. They noticed the heroes. The civilians trapped in the streets saw the difference. While enhanced soups fired indiscriminately, Overwatch worked to protect life. Tracer pulled a child from the path of a collapsing billboard. Mercy stabilized a man struck by an energy blast. Winston held a squad of armed soldiers at bay without harming them unnecessarily. Huey, watching from a safe distance with Butcher's team, whispered, almost in disbelief, They're actually saving people. Not just fighting back. Saving. Mother's Milk muttered. It's not how soups normally behave. Not in Vaught's world. Butcher's eyes narrowed. Exactly. And that's the problem for Vaught. People are starting to question the story. Above the warehouse, a supersonic blur streaked across the sky. A-Train, his pride burning. He collided with Tracer mid-air, the two spinning wildly before she blinked behind him, creating distance. Fastest man alive, eh? She quipped, panting. Guess we'll see about that. On the ground, soldier. 76 faced an entire squad of Vought-enhanced soldiers. Form up, he shouted, signaling Winston and Genji. We hold them together. Precision, teamwork. Don't let them break morale. Each clash reverberated through the night. Bullets ricocheted. Energy beams scorched concrete. and debris rained from above. And yet, through the chaos, Overwatch never lost sight of their priority: saving lives, not killing enemies. As the battle escalated, screens across New York displayed one burning question: if these so-called rogue soups are saving people, then what if Vought is lying? The question spread like wildfire across social media. Hashtags exploded. Citizen live streams showed the truth. The world's supposed protectors might not be the heroes they were promised. Inside the warehouse, Winston glanced at the live feeds. They're seeing it. The public is watching. But the moment this becomes too dangerous, we'll have every soup in Vought's arsenal coming at us at once. Genji sheathed his sword for a brief second, eyes scanning. We may have just started a war we cannot fully control. Soldier, 76 clenched his fists. Then we fight, and we don't stop until the truth is out. And high above, somewhere beyond the storm clouds, red eyes glowed faintly. Homelander had arrived on the fringes of the battlefield, watching, waiting, and smiling. Because now, Overwatch had made the first move, and the real storm was just beginning. The city held its breath. The question remained: could truth survive when the world's most powerful heroes had been lying all along? Lightning cracked across the skyline, illuminating the chaos below, and hinting at the catastrophic confrontations still to come. High above the city, beyond the storm clouds, Homelander hovered silently. The rain pelted his cape, the neon lights below reflecting off his glowing eyes. For hours he had watched. Every move of the Overwatch team, every rescue, every tactical maneuver had been recorded in his mind. This wasn't simple curiosity. It was something darker. He had fought soups before. He had crushed entire squads of enhanced soldiers, toppled skyscrapers, and bent nations to his will. Yet, these newcomers, Tracer Winston Genji, Mercy Soldier, 76, they didn't fear him. Not a flicker of hesitation, not a trace of awe. And that unsettled him. Inside the warehouse, Winston had just repelled another wave of Vought-enhanced soldiers. Mercy stabilized a civilian who had been trapped under a fallen beam. Genji and Soldier, 76, coordinated flawlessly, their movements almost prescient in anticipating threats. Homelander's vision cut through the clouds. He studied their teamwork, their calm under fire, the way they prioritized lives over conflict. And for the first time in years, he felt something. Frustration? Confusion? Jealousy? What? He whispered, voice low and dangerous. Why do they protect people instead of showing fear? He circled the city, watching Tracer blink between enemies. Winston's shields absorbing blasts, Mercy's healing light glowing brightly over the rubble. Each action a testament to something he had never learned: selflessness, cooperation, trust. He had never needed anyone, and yet he had always demanded it. The people adored him, yes, but for all the fame, all the spectacle, they feared him more than they trusted him. And that trust, overcoming fear without coercion, what these new heroes had, it gnawed at him. Homelander's obsession grew. He began tracking them obsessively, not just their battles, but their downtime, their interactions, the small moments that revealed their humanity. Tracer laughed quietly with Winston after evacuating a family. Mercy gently scolded a civilian for panicking. Soldier, 76, scanned the perimeter even when no enemies were present. Genji cleaned and sharpened his sword, nodding silently to Winston as they planned the next move. Each ordinary action fueled something inside him. He clenched his fists so tightly that the knuckles cracked beneath his skin. Why do people trust them? More than me, he hissed. Meanwhile, back in the warehouse, Overwatch sensed the invisible pressure. Winston's brow furrowed as his sensors detected an aerial observer. Someone's watching, he said quietly. Mercy's hands stilled. Powerful, not Vought standard. Tracer grinned nervously. That's a bit on the nose, isn't it? Genji tilted his head. We are being studied by someone with immense power. Strategy is underway. Soldier 76's eyes narrowed. Not good. Whoever it is, they've been observing every move. They're not just curious. They're calculating. Homelander descended, just barely above the clouds. He spoke, voice low, almost intimate, as if he were confessing to himself rather than the team below. They think they can be heroes without me, without my rules, without me. Lightning flashed behind him, illuminating his piercing gaze. For the first time, he wasn't smiling. He was measuring, calculating, obsessing. People trust them, follow them, believe in them, and it's not my doing, not my control, not my world. The storm raged harder. Rain lashed his face, yet he felt no discomfort. Fear meant nothing, but envy burned. As he circled lower, the city beneath him appeared fragile, illuminated by the flashes of Overwatch's defensive maneuvers. He watched Tracer pull a child from the path of a collapsing beam. Mercy stabilized a civilian's breathing mid-combat. Winston held a squad of enemies at bay with precise control. He clenched his jaw. How do they do it? How do they command loyalty without fear? It was a question that haunted him, a question he had never faced, and it left a cold, hollow emptiness inside his chest. Somewhere deep in his mind, a dangerous thought began to take shape. If the world trusted them more than him, if people could believe in heroes without submitting to him, then he would have to break them, not destroy them in a fight. That would be too simple. No. He needed to understand them, analyze them, prove to himself that their loyalty, their teamwork, their humanity could be shattered. And he would. Homelander's eyes glowed brighter. The clouds parted just slightly, giving him a view of the warehouse where the team had consolidated. Below, the storm's reflection danced across broken glass and puddles. They will learn, he whispered. They will fear me. They will belong to me. But as he hovered there, watching the team he could not control, one unsettling realization hit him. They did not fear him. And the question lingered in the air, unspoken but deafening. Could he really bend them? Or would they teach the world a lesson even he could not undo? Lightning cracked overhead. His shadow stretched across the city like a warning. Homelander's obsession was no longer just a curiosity. It was the beginning of a dangerous, personal war. And for Overwatch, they were about to feel the weight of his fixation. Closer, faster, and far more personal than any enemy they had ever faced. The headquarters of Vought International was usually a place of unshakable control. Glass towers gleamed under neon lights, screens displayed stock prices and global PR campaigns, and every corner exuded the quiet confidence of a corporation that had mastered both image and influence. Tonight, however, the air was tense, almost brittle. Inside the private conference room, the members of the Seven gathered. Homelander hovered near the ceiling, arms crossed, his gaze sharp as ever. but the usual confidence that accompanied his presence felt offset. Queen Maeve sat at the long table, fingers tapping lightly against the polished surface. Her usual composed demeanor wavered. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about appearances or contracts. She was thinking about truth. "They're different," she said softly, mostly to herself. A-Train, pacing nervously by the windows, didn't hear her. "Different? All I see is a new threat. And if we screw this up, I'm finished. Everyone's talking about them online. The fastest man alive? Look like a joke. People might like them more than me." Black Noir, as always, remained silent, his mask concealing any reaction. But the subtle shift in posture, head tilting slightly, stance less rigid, betrayed a rare unease. Homelander's voice cut through the tension. "Enough of this. Overwatch isn't just a threat to our operations. They're a threat to the idea of power itself. The world loves control. The world fears me because they know I can break them. But these creatures, they inspire loyalty without fear. That's dangerous." Queen Maeve's eyes flicked toward Homelander, a spark of doubt breaking through her calculated calm. "Dangerous. Or honest," she said. Homelander turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" "They save people," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not for cameras, not for contracts, not to be celebrated. They're heroes because they choose to be, not because someone tells them to." The room went silent. A-Train scoffed nervously. "Choice? Loyalty? You don't get to have that in this world, Maeve. Not if you want to keep your face on billboards and your contracts rolling in." Queen Maeve clenched her fists. "Maybe that's the problem." Homelander's expression darkened. "Watch yourself. Doubt is a dangerous thing. You question me, and you question your place here. You're either with the Seven or against them. Choose." Maeve didn't answer immediately. Instead, her gaze drifted to the live feeds from New York, showing Overwatch saving civilians amid chaos, guiding families to safety while engaging VOTS operatives. The contrast was stark. Their actions weren't flashy. There were no PR cameras, no fanfare, just life being protected. And it unnerved her more than she wanted to admit. A-Train muttered under his breath, his panic barely controlled. "If people start trusting them over us, I'm finished. My brand, my fame, everything." Homelander's jaw tightened. "Then we make them fear us." Maeve shook her head slightly, a subtle but deliberate defiance. "And if fear isn't enough?" A chill passed through the room. Homelander's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something predatory rising behind his usual calm. Elsewhere, Stan Edgar observed the discord through monitors. The CEO's face was unreadable, but his fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk. "The team is unstable," he said. Homelander's obsession, A-Train's panic, Maeve's questioning. This is exactly the leverage we need, but we must control it carefully. Any fracture we cannot manage becomes a liability. The Seven, the supposed pillars of VOT's power, were beginning to crumble from within. Loyalty was faltering. Pride was cracking. And Homelander, obsessed with proving his supremacy, was pushing each member further toward either compliance or confrontation. Back in the main room, Queen Maeve leaned forward, almost whispering to herself, "If heroes can exist without control, maybe there's hope." A-Train's hand twitched near the console, dialing communications. "We need backup. We can't let them..." Black Noir's sudden movement caught everyone's attention. He stepped closer to Homelander, almost like a silent reminder of the stakes. Even he sensed the tension, the fragility of the team, the unstable balance of power. Homelander's gaze swept the room. We hold the line. We are the Seven. But one misstep, and this team of heroes will expose every weakness we've buried for years. And I will not allow it. The room held its breath. A faint hum of unease filled the space, thicker than any storm outside. Because the Seven were cracking. And Vought, they knew it. But even they couldn't predict how far the fractures would spread, or how quickly the world would notice the difference. Outside, the city lights reflected the chaos below, the whispers of rebellion growing louder in the shadows. And one question hung over everything, unspoken but undeniable. Who would break first, the manufactured heroes, or the heroes who built themselves? The warehouse was eerily silent after the last skirmish. Smoke curled from the broken walls, and rain dripped steadily from the shattered roof. Mercy moved carefully through the rubble, her staff glowing faintly to illuminate the shadows. Her eyes caught movement. Subtle, fragile. She knelt beside a small group of trembling figures huddled in a corner, their skin pale, veins faintly visible beneath the surface, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. These were victims, children and young adults, injected with Compound 5, their powers unstable, their minds fragmented. Mercy's heart ached. Winston, Genji, look at this, she whispered urgently, scanning their vitals. Her holographic interface lit up with data she had never seen before. Mutations, organ strain, cognitive degradation. Winston's heavy frame appeared behind her, his brows furrowed. Mercy, these are Vaught's experiments. She nodded. And they're failing. They need help. Now. Genji stepped forward, sword sheathed, silent as always, but observant. If we rescue them, we risk losing our position to strike against Vought directly. Soldier, 76's jaw tightened. We can't just leave them. That's not what heroes do. Mercy's hands trembled. Every patient she stabilized, every life she tried to save, was a reminder of the stakes. She could focus on saving them here, one by one, but Vaught's operations were global. Every passing moment meant more innocent people being used as weapons. Tracer zipped beside her, voice light but tense. We don't have time to hold everyone's hand. The sooner we hit Vought, the sooner we stop this madness. Mercy's gaze dropped to a young boy whose powers were erratic, dangerous even to himself. Sparks danced around his fingertips. He's unstable. If I leave him, he could hurt someone. If I stay, the others suffer. How can I choose? Winston placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Mercy, you've always made the impossible choice. But remember, saving a life is never small, even if the world still needs justice. Her eyes filled with tears, but she steadied herself. I've healed countless wounds, patched countless broken bodies. But this is different. These people aren't just injured. They're instruments. Vought made them weapons. And if I save them without stopping the source, it's meaningless. Genji's voice, calm but firm, pierced through her turmoil. Then we do both, but we must be strategic. Saving lives does not mean abandoning the mission. Every second counts. Mercy exhaled slowly. Every life I save here delays our strike, and every second we hesitate, Vought strengthens their hold. They're planning more than experiments. They want a global army of soups. Compound Vi, in every corner of the world. And if we don't stop it, her voice faltered. The world could become a battlefield with no winners. Soldier, 76 tightened his fists, scanning the holographic map of Vought facilities. Then we do it smart. Divide. We stabilize the victims here, while Winston and I coordinate the strike against their labs. Tracer blinked, her usual energy dimmed by the gravity of the situation. Split ops. Tricky. But I can help Mercy stabilize them. Keep the kids safe while the rest of you move. Mercy moved among the victims, her staff glowing brighter, carefully calming energy surges, stopping uncontrolled bursts of power, soothing the fear in their eyes. Each patient required focus, precision, and care. Any mistake could be fatal. But as she worked, a horrifying realization hit her. Vaught's network wasn't limited to this city. The surveillance feed she hacked revealed dozens of similar labs, each with more subjects, more victims, more lives at risk. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They're everywhere. And we can't save them all. Not in time. Winston's voice echoed, calm but urgent. Then we stop Vought. That's the only way to save the greatest number. Mercy's hands shook as she stabilized the last of the children for the moment. She stepped back and looked at the team, at the chaos outside, at the looming shadow of Homelander watching from the clouds. If we fail, it's not just these people who die. It's everyone. And if Vought succeeds, the world as we know it is over. Her eyes hardened. We expose them. We fight them. And we save every life we can along the way, no matter the cost. But even as she spoke, the air outside rippled. Something inhuman moved fast. Too fast to be seen clearly. A blur of power descending from the skyline. The sound of the city shifting under immense force. Mercy's heart sank. They're coming! And high above, a figure watched with cold interest. Homelander's smile cut across the stormy night. Because Vought wasn't the only threat, and Mercy's impossible choice was about to become even more deadly. The world was watching, and now Overwatch had become the target of both corporate and superhuman obsession. The storm outside wasn't just rain. It was the beginning of a war with stakes that no one had yet fully understood. The city was unnervingly quiet. The kind of quiet that hinted at chaos brewing just beneath the surface. Screens flickered across Times Square. News channels cut abruptly from their usual programming, and the internet surged with an unprecedented signal. Overwatch and the boys had done what no one thought possible. They had hijacked Vaught's global broadcast network. Mercy's hands hovered over a console, adjusting the feed as Winston coordinated the signal from a mobile command hub. "We're live," she whispered, voice tense. The holographic map glowed, showing that the feed was reaching millions, spanning continents in seconds. Huey's jaw was tight. He glanced at Butcher, whose face was set like stone. "You're sure about this?" Huey asked, unease in his voice. Butcher's grin was sharp, teeth clenched. "Sure? Bloody sure. This is what they need. Vaught's filth. Everyone sees it. And maybe, just maybe, Homelander gets a taste of what it's like to be hated by everyone he's supposed to protect." Soldier, 76 stepped forward, voice low but firm. "This isn't revenge. This is justice. We're exposing lies, stopping abuse, giving people the truth. That's the difference." Butcher's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me what the difference is. I've seen what these bastards do. People like me, we don't wait for justice. We take it. Tracer zipped past them, energy crackling around her as she adjusted cameras, her grin tense. Well, whatever your philosophy, mate, the world's about to see it all, and it's not pretty. The broadcast began with the stark truth. Vaught's experiments, the children, the compound V injections, the engineered superhumans, the deaths covered up, the propaganda campaigns, the lies about heroism. Footage of Overwatch saving civilians, contrasting sharply with Vaught's staged heroics, played in tandem. Queen Maeve appeared on one of the live feeds, a defiant figure framed by the ruins of a lab. "You've been lied to," she said, voice steady but carrying the weight of guilt and awakening. "The heroes you worship are not what you think, and the world is paying for it." The audience reacted instantly. Social media exploded. News channels scrambled to verify the feed, but the evidence was undeniable. Screens displayed live streams of the labs, Vought executives scrambling, Homelander hovering above the city in growing fury, and the Overwatch team moving like specters among the chaos. High above, Homelander's eyes flared with rage. His usual cold smirk was gone, replaced by a tension that radiated from him like heat. "Impossible," he whispered. They can't do this. They can't take my world from me." Below, Butcher watched the live feeds with grim satisfaction. "About bloody time," he muttered. "Everyone's seen the truth. Now let's see if he can handle it." "Soldier." 76 stepped beside him, still trying to keep the focus on reason. "This isn't a vendetta. We need this to succeed, not just to humiliate them. People need to see what's real, or nothing changes." Butcher's eyes were hard as flint. "Sometimes, Jack, real change requires a little humiliation." The broadcast continued, showing Homelander using his powers to intimidate the civilians and control the seven behind the scenes. A-Train panicked as footage of him sabotaging competitors went viral. Black Noir remained a silent enigma, but his every movement was captured and broadcasted as a symbol of Vaught's hidden dangers. Huey watched the world react in shock, fear, and anger. "People are going to riot," he whispered. Tracer smirked nervously. "They might, but that's what happens when the truth lands like a hammer." Mercy's hands shook as she stabilized the feed, keeping it live while monitoring both civilian safety and security breaches from Vought countermeasures. "They're hitting back," she warned. "Vaught's trying to sever the signal." Winston's voice cut through, calm but urgent. "We hold it. Keep this running for as long as possible. Every second counts." From the clouds above, Homelander finally snapped. His fury was a storm unmatched. He roared, the sound echoing across the city, shaking glass and rending steel. Heat vision flared indiscriminately, yet he held back, not out of mercy, but calculation. "They've made a mistake," he hissed. "They think the world can betray me and survive." Queen Maeve watched the chaos on a separate feed, her face a mixture of relief and dread. "They've forced his hand," she muttered. Black Noir's silent vigilance turned toward the team as if sensing that the coming storm would not be something any of them could fully control. And as the broadcast reached its zenith, millions of screens, countless lives watching, the question loomed over the city. If the world now knew the truth, could even Homelander's power contain the fury that followed? Lightning cracked overhead. The sky trembled. The city waited, breathless. And somewhere deep within the clouds, a godlike figure's obsession turned lethal. The real war had just begun. The world was unraveling. Not gradually, not with warning, but suddenly, violently. Compound V enhanced soups, previously confined under corporate control, were now acting unpredictably. Panic swept through cities like wildfire. Cars overturned in frantic traffic jams. Buildings shook as uncontrolled powers ripped through infrastructure, and civilians ran blindly, screaming in terror. In New York, the skyline was punctuated by flashes of superhuman combat. A-Train's once perfect speed spiraled into reckless destruction as he collided with helicopters and vehicles. Black Noir moved through the streets with silent precision, but his every strike, meant to suppress, only fueled hysteria. Queen Maeve tried to restore order, her authoritative voice lost in the cacophony of chaos, drowned out by the screams of frightened citizens. Overwatch stood at the epicenter of the storm, coordinating as best they could. Winston barked instructions through the comms. Tracer, evacuate civilians from Fifth Avenue. Mercy, stabilize the surges in East Harlem. Genji, neutralize any high-threat targets, but avoid lethal force unless absolutely necessary. Tracer zipped between collapsed streets and upturned cars, moving civilians out of danger with her trademark speed, but the magnitude of destruction was overwhelming. "There's too many of them," she shouted over the roar of collapsing concrete. "We can't control this." Mercy worked tirelessly, her staff glowing, attempting to calm surges of unstable powers. Each child, each young adult with Compound 5 mutations, demanded complete attention, but the numbers were overwhelming. Even her expertise was stretched beyond capacity. Soldier 76 positioned himself atop a crumbling skyscraper, sniper rifle in hand. He coordinated Overwatch's tactical strikes, keeping their enemies at bay while trying to prevent collateral damage. Sweat ran down his face, and every decision carried the weight of life or death. Below, the public watched the chaos unfold live. Social media streams, news networks, and citizen footage captured the total breakdown of order. The carefully constructed illusion of heroism, the one Vought had sold for decades, was gone, and in its place was fear, anarchy, and the undeniable reality of uncontrolled power. Homelander hovered above the city, his face a mask of fury. He had been provoked, humiliated by the broadcast that revealed Vought's crimes and the truth about the manufactured heroes. Now, he surveyed the chaos with a mixture of rage and fascination. "So this is what happens when control is lost," he murmured, eyes scanning the city like a predator. Queen Maeve tried to reason with him. "Homelander, this is your failure. We're losing control, and people are dying." "They fear me, don't they?" Homelander's voice was cold, almost detached, and yet they respect them. They listen to Overwatch. Maeve's voice broke slightly. "It's not respect, it's trust. Something you've never understood." Meanwhile, globally, the chaos mirrored New York. Cities from London to Tokyo reported similar uprisings of rogue soupies. Governments scrambled. Military forces attempted containment, but most conventional weapons were useless against individuals capable of moving faster than bullets, tearing steel, or projecting devastating energy. Overwatch faced a moral and tactical crisis. They could save civilians, but only in small pockets. If they attempted to confront every rogue soup directly, they risked losing control themselves. Mercy's heart ached as she stabilized one young soup, only to see another rampaging nearby. Genji, darting through the chaos, reflected aloud. "Their power is immense, but without guidance, it becomes destruction itself." Winston's voice was calm, but urgent over the comms. "Focus on the lives we can save. Tactical precision over brute force. Our priority is stability, not proving strength." The Seven, on the other hand, were powerless to restore authority. Homelander alone could impose order, but his intervention was selective, based on ego and vendetta, rather than the greater good. A-Train's panic and reckless actions compounded the destruction. Queen Maeve, despite her moral compass, found herself sidelined, unable to impose control without risking further harm. And then, in the midst of the chaos, a realization hit Overwatch. This was bigger than any one city, bigger than any single battle. If the world's superhumans were left unchecked, the collapse would be total. Governments would fail, societies would fracture, and millions of innocent lives would be lost. Mercy's voice trembled as she relayed the information. We can't save everyone. Not alone. Not like this. Winston's gaze hardened. Then it's down to two forces, Overwatch and Homelander. If we can't stabilize this world ourselves, we need to either stop him or convince him to help before the entire system collapses. Tracer zipped past, her usual lighthearted energy gone, replaced by grim determination. And neither of them are exactly cooperative, are they? The camera panned across the skyline as buildings smoldered, streets erupted in fire and debris, and panic reached a fever pitch. The world had tipped into chaos. And somewhere high above the city, Homelander's eyes glinted, reflecting the flames below. A cruel smile spread across his face. Because in the end, only two forces could save the world from total collapse, and neither one of them could be trusted fully. The clock was ticking, and the next move would decide the fate of millions. The city trembled as if the skyline itself feared what was coming. Sirens blared, and glass shattered across streets already torn by chaos. Overwatch had prepared for threats before, but nothing in their experience could match the force descending from the clouds. Homelander. He appeared first as a shadow against the storm, moving faster than the eye could follow, a human-shaped hurricane radiating raw power. The Overwatch team braced themselves, knowing the confrontation would be unlike any they had faced before. Winston's deep breaths steadied him as he scanned the city, calculating trajectories and civilian clusters. "Tracer," he barked into the comms, "get the civilians out. Prioritize hospitals and schools. You know the drill." Tracer zipped forward, a streak of blue and orange, pulling terrified pedestrians into alleys and makeshift shelters, leaving behind only the hum of residual energy as she vanished from sight. Each second was a heartbeat, each choice a potential life saved or lost. Genji moved with precision, confronting rogue supes who had surged into violence during Vaught's collapse. He deflected blows, guided missiles, and blasts of energy with his katana, each movement a dance of deadly grace. Even so, he felt the pressure mounting. The enemy's supes were powerful, yes, but unpredictable. And unpredictability, he knew, was often more dangerous than raw strength. Mercy hovered nearby, healing those she could reach, stabilizing wounds from shattered concrete and energy discharges. Her aura glowed faintly, a beacon in the inferno of the city. She worked quickly, eyes darting to Winston, who now prepared for the inevitable confrontation. And then he arrived. Homelander descended, the clouds parting in a violent gust, his eyes locking onto Winston with a predator's focus. "So, the ape thinks he can play with fire," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "I've seen you organize. You think you can lead people better than I can?" Winston stood firm. "We don't lead with fear. We protect. That's the difference between us." Homelander laughed, a sound that cut through the storm like ice. "Protect? You've been playing hero in a sandbox, monkey. This is the real world. And in the real world, strength decides everything. The first clash was instantaneous. Homelander's punch sent a shockwave through the streets, tearing cars from the pavement and splintering walls. Winston leapt, landing with a seismic thud that sent debris flying, his enhanced strength countering the initial impact just enough to avoid being crushed. Tracer darted between them, warning of falling structures, while Genji intercepted rogue soups attempting to flank Winston. Mercy's voice echoed over comms, urgent but controlled. Winston, don't get cornered. I can stabilize civilians, but you have to hold him. Each strike from Homelander tested Winston's limits. He blocked, parried, and countered, but the air around them cracked with raw energy. Homelander's eyes glowed as he unleashed heat vision in rapid succession. Winston deflected debris with his gauntlets, but even he felt the city itself shudder under the sheer intensity of the assault. Nearby, Soldier, 76 organized a defensive perimeter. Using precise suppressive fire, he coordinated with Genji and Tracer to protect civilians and key intersections. Each tactical decision had to be flawless. One mistake could cost lives and allow Homelander to exploit the chaos. The battle spread across the city like wildfire. Skyscrapers became arenas, streets became rivers of rubble, and every intersection held the potential for catastrophe. Rogue soups collided with Overwatch forces, their uncontrolled powers threatening to tip the scale further. Yet, through the destruction, Winston's calm resolve stood out. You rely on fear, Homelander, he shouted over the roar of collapsing concrete. We rely on trust. That is our strength. Homelander's eyes narrowed. Trust? I don't need trust. I am trusted. Feared, worshipped. Feared, Winston corrected, tightening his stance. And fear alone doesn't save lives. The two collided again, sending a gust of wind that toppled streetlights and shattered windows for blocks. For a moment, time seemed suspended as they stared each other down, the fate of the city hinging on the outcome of this duel. Mercy's voice cut through the tension. Winston, watch out! But Winston didn't flinch. He had a plan, a strategy rooted not in overwhelming power, but in precision, coordination, and heart. Homelander hovered above, smirking, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a first moment of doubt. He had met strong opponents before, but none who moved, thought, and fought as a unit like this. And then, from the rooftop of a crumbling building, Tracer's voice rang out, tinged with urgency and fear. Winston, incoming! A massive energy surge, unpredictable and violent, streaked through the air, aimed directly at the ape who thought himself unstoppable. The city held its breath. Because this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was the beginning of a war that could decide the future of the world. And Winston had no choice but to meet it head on. The next move would either stop Homelander or destroy everything. The city lay in ruins, but the battle was far from over. Smoke billowed from shattered skyscrapers, and the streets below were rivers of fire and debris. Above it all, two forces hovered, symbols of conflicting ideals. On one side, Homelander, the ultimate embodiment of fear and control. On the other, Overwatch, fighting not just with strength, but with purpose, strategy, and a guiding moral code. Homelander circled the battlefield, his eyes scanning, calculating, measuring. You don't understand, Winston, he said, his voice echoing with authority and arrogance. Heroes are supposed to lead. Heroes rule. The weak need guidance, even if it's fear. That's how the world survives. Winston's fists clenched. You call that leadership? You call terror leadership? People don't need rulers, Homelander. They need protectors. They need hope. The ideological clash was tangible, almost electric. Every punch, every burst of energy, every strategic move carried with it more than just physical weight. It carried a philosophy. Overwatch's moves were defensive, precise, aimed at saving lives even while engaging Homelander and his rogue allies. Homelander's attacks, however, were raw, unchecked, designed to dominate, intimidate, and humiliate. Tracers zipped between the two forces, evacuating civilians with impossible speed. Yet, each time she saved a life, Homelander's heat vision cut a swath just meters away, forcing her to adapt instantly. Come on, she muttered, heart racing. We can't let him scare everyone into submission. Genji darted across the battlefield, clashing with rogue supes emboldened by Homelander's ideology. Every move he made was calculated, precise, yet he couldn't ignore the spectacle above. The looming figure of Homelander, raining down power without hesitation. They fight for themselves, he said, almost to himself. He fights to make others small. Mercy hovered above the chaos, her staff glowing as she stabilized civilians, tended to the injured, and coordinated with Overwatch's field units. Even amidst carnage, her voice remained calm, resolute. We're showing them what real heroes are, she called. Hope, even in the darkest hour. Soldier 76 took a position atop a crumbling building, aiming suppressive fire at Homelander's advancing forces. He had fought criminals, terrorists, and rogue operatives, but never a being with absolute power, with no moral compass but fear itself. This isn't just combat, he muttered. It's a lesson in humanity. The world watched. Broadcast feeds, cell phone cameras, and news drones transmitted the conflict to millions. Citizens below and across the globe saw a confrontation unlike any before. Some hid in terror. Others, inspired, cheered for the team that risked everything to save lives, despite impossible odds. It was no longer a simple fight for survival. It was a battle for the definition of heroism. Homelander hovered above a burning intersection, fury etched into every line of his face. They trust them. They trust you. How is that possible? He growled, directing energy beams at Overwatch units. Winston blocked and countered, dodging blasts that could pulverize steel. Trust comes from action, not fear, he yelled, each word carrying the weight of conviction. We don't need worship. We need responsibility. And in that moment, the ideological tension escalated further. Rogue supes, inspired by Homelander's philosophy, attacked indiscriminately, creating pockets of chaos. Yet Overwatch's careful coordination saved countless lives. Civilians began recording, streaming, and sharing, witnessing for the first time a force that acted purely for their protection. Huey, observing from a safe distance, whispered to Butcher, "They're different. They care about everyone. Not just power, not just fame. Real heroes." Butcher's face remained hard, but even he felt a tremor of realization. If that's true, then this changes everything. Back on the battlefield, Winston landed atop a crumbling rooftop, facing Homelander directly. "This is more than a fight for the city," Winston said, voice calm but commanding. "It's a fight for what heroism means, and we're not backing down." Homelander's eyes flickered, a storm of emotion hidden behind his usual arrogance. He had faced supes before, but none like this. None with such unity, such unwavering moral focus, and such humanity. For the first time, doubt gnawed at him, not weakness, but confusion. Tracer shouted from below, "Winston, watch out. He's coming down." Homelander's descent was like a comet streaking toward the earth, full of power, wrath, and intent. The city held its breath. The world held its breath. Because this wasn't just a battle of strength anymore. It was a battle of belief. And every soul watching had to ask themselves, which kind of hero do they truly believe in? Hope or fear? The answer hung in the air, heavy, unresolved, and terrifyingly close to tipping the balance. The city had become a war zone. Streets lay cracked, buildings smoked, and fires danced across abandoned vehicles. Homelander's power pressed relentlessly against Overwatch, each strike a reminder that even heroes had limits. Winston, though still defiant, felt the weight of the attack as though the very air had turned solid, each breath a struggle against the oppressive force above. Genji darted between collapsing streets, deflecting attacks with his katana, yet even his agility was tested to the extreme. Sparks flew from deflected missiles, and chunks of concrete hurtled past him like shrapnel. Beside him, Soldier 76 was pinned down by a barrage of precision energy blasts from supes loyal to Homelander. Every shot he returned had to count. One mistake, and a civilian or teammate would pay the price. Mercy hovered above the chaos, her staff glowing as she tried to stabilize Winston, who had taken the brunt of a devastating strike. "Hold on!" she shouted, her voice strained as she channeled her power to mend torn ligaments and internal injuries. Even she was beginning to feel the toll. Tracer zipped through the battlefield, pulling terrified civilians from crumbling buildings. She barely had time to breathe, let alone consider the growing realization that they were slowly being overwhelmed. Homelander moved with an almost casual cruelty, his speed, strength, and precision making him a nearly unstoppable force. "Stay on your feet," Winston roared, planting his gauntlets into the concrete as he countered a devastating punch. The rooftop shook violently, scattering debris into the streets below. Even with his incredible strength, he could feel the energy of Homelander beginning to dominate the battlefield. The team was pushed to the brink. Each member bore injuries that, in any ordinary situation, would have forced them to retreat. Yet, they refused to give in. They were determined to protect civilians, to fight for something greater than themselves. But Homelander's relentless assault was beginning to fracture their formation, threatening to crush the last line of resistance. And then, something unexpected happened. From the streets, from the rooftops, from broken windows and alleys, civilians began to emerge. Not in fear, but in defiance. They were not armed with energy weapons or enhanced powers, but with determination, resourcefulness, and a willingness to act. They pulled makeshift barricades into place, helped guide trapped citizens away from danger, and used whatever they had to impede Homelander's advance. It began slowly. A single street vendor flung debris to slow a charging soup. A construction worker toppled a crane girder to block a pathway. Then more joined. Bus drivers, students, office workers, even first responders who had survived the initial chaos. Their collective action began to create pockets of safety for Overwatch, giving the heroes precious moments to regroup and counterattack. Genji noticed it first. They're helping, he muttered under his breath, deflecting a blast aimed at a group of civilians. "They believe in us." Soldier 76 shouted orders to coordinate with these impromptu allies. "Listen to me. Protect each other, block their paths, and stay out of Homelander's line of fire." His voice carried authority, and the civilians followed instinctively, forming human barriers, dragging rubble to shield the weak, and even distracting rogue supes long enough for Winston and Tracer to reposition. Homelander paused mid-air, a flash of disbelief crossing his usually untouchable demeanor. What, what is this? He hissed. For the first time, he confronted something beyond his personal control. A united will. Ordinary people acting with extraordinary courage. Mercy's eyes widened as she looked down at the civilians, stabilizing a young woman caught in the chaos. They're choosing to fight with us, she whispered. Not because they have powers, but because they trust us. Winston took a deep breath, feeling the renewed strength that came not from muscles or gadgets, but from belief. We're not alone, Homelander, he said, voice carrying over the battlefield. This world, it fights with us. That is the power you will never understand. Homelander's face darkened, fury and disbelief intertwining. His blows became more erratic, less controlled, as he tried to assert dominance over a force he could not intimidate. The citizens' courage had shifted the battlefield subtly, strategically, emotionally. But even as hope surged, the team knew the danger was far from over. Homelander was adapting, analyzing every move, learning, calculating. Every second they gained from civilian aid was temporary. One misstep, one wrong move, and the city would collapse entirely under his wrath. Tracer called out, Winston, keep him busy. Everyone else, prepare for a counterstrike. And above the ruins, hovering with unstoppable power, Homelander's eyes locked onto Winston once more, a silent promise and threat of devastation. The tipping point had come. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was about inspiring a world to believe. And the next strike, the next clash, could decide the fate of everyone watching. The question remained, could the courage of ordinary people and heroes, combined, truly be enough to stop him? The world had never been quieter, yet never more alive. Screens across every city broadcasted the aftermath of the conflict. Citizens, ordinary people, once cowed by fear and false promises, now spoke freely, debated openly, and confronted the institutions that had long ruled through spectacle. Vaught's carefully constructed illusion of heroism lay in ruins. In the heart of the crumbling headquarters, Queen Maeve sat slumped in a leather chair, staring at the shattered monitors. The Seven were no longer a team. A-Train had disappeared into hiding, humiliated and desperate to reclaim fame he no longer possessed. Black Noir remained silent, brooding in the shadows, his loyalty fractured. Starlight, shaken but resolute, walked among the rubble with a quiet dignity that now stood in stark contrast to her former colleague's vanity. Homelander, once untouchable, hovered above the city streets, his gaze cold and calculating, but underneath, uncertainty simmered. For years he had fed on admiration, on the worship of a public too terrified or too compliant to question him. And now, that worship had evaporated. The cheers had turned to jeers, the reverence to revulsion. Winston landed cautiously, surveying the chaos. His chest heaved, adrenaline still coursing through him. Yet he was more focused on the broader picture. The city had survived. Civilians were emerging from shelters, tending to the injured, and reclaiming the streets from the shadow of fear. For the first time, heroism had become something tangible, something shared between protectors and the people they defended. Tracers zipped along the avenue, guiding survivors away from collapsed buildings. Even with her superhuman speed, she felt the gravity of what had changed. The people weren't just witnessing heroism. They were participating in it. They were no longer passive observers. They were empowered. Mercy hovered above, tending to wounded citizens. "This is unprecedented," she murmured, her voice steady but filled with awe. "They're not just inspired, they're active. They're fighting with us, for themselves, for the future." Homelander's fury became palpable. He lunged at Winston, his fists slamming into concrete and steel. Yet with each strike, the citizens subtly intervened. Debris was hurled, makeshift barricades erected, and small acts of defiance slowed him down. Every punch that would have obliterated a street now met resistance. The fear that had once made him untouchable now faltered against collective courage. "Soldier," 76 called out, coordinating Overwatch's remaining forces alongside civilians. "Focus on containment, protect the innocents, and isolate him." His tactical mind worked like a machine, turning desperation into strategy. The lines between hero and people blurred. They were now united in purpose. The collapse of Vought's influence was swift and merciless. Social media exploded with evidence of Compound V experiments, rogue operations, and corporate lies. News networks abandoned scripted narratives to report the unvarnished truth. Public outrage reached critical mass. Protests ignited across multiple cities, and the Seven's once ironclad brand was now synonymous with betrayal. Queen Maeve confronted Homelander privately, her voice cold but resolute. "This isn't about strength anymore, Nathan," she said. "It's about trust, and the world doesn't trust you." His expression twisted, an unfamiliar mix of rage and disbelief. "Trust? They need me. Without me. Chaos." Winston stepped forward, calm and commanding. "They've proven they can survive, Homelander. They don't need fear. They need heroes who serve, not rulers who dominate." Homelander recoiled slightly, the weight of that truth hitting him harder than any blow. He had always defined himself by supremacy and admiration, yet here he was, stripped of both. The adoration he craved had turned into scrutiny, skepticism, and open defiance. Starlight, once timid and constrained by corporate scripts, now stood openly among civilians, helping coordinate aid and relief. She caught Homelander's gaze, unflinching. "This is what real power looks like," she said softly. "Not control, not fear, not fame. Responsibility, protection, sacrifice." The public's awakening was complete. Children who once idolized the false heroes now looked to Overwatch and their own neighbors as models of courage. Streets rang with chants and calls for accountability. And Homelander? He hovered above the city, an apex predator without prey, a tyrant without obedience, without worship. He was nothing. But even as the world celebrated, the air carried a tense, unspoken question. Could a being like Homelander ever be truly contained? Because tyranny may fall in public opinion, but power, raw, unchecked power, never disappears. And somewhere, in the shadows of the city, plans were already being whispered, alliances reconsidered, and the seeds of a new conflict quietly planted. The question remained, had the world truly won, or had it only survived the first wave? The sun rose slowly over a city scarred but alive. Smoke still curled from toppled buildings. Streets were littered with debris, and yet, amid the rubble, a sense of quiet determination spread. Overwatch moved through the recovering city, not as invaders, not as celebrities, but as guides, protectors, and mentors. Their mission had evolved. It was no longer just survival. It was restoration. Winston adjusted his glasses, scanning the chaotic scene below. Civilians worked alongside the team, lifting debris, distributing water, tending to the wounded. There was no fanfare, no cameras, no corporate cameras broadcasting their deeds. Just action. Real, human action. Mercy hovered overhead, tending to injuries both small and severe, her aura of calm professionalism offering reassurance. Tracer zipped through the streets, handing out instructions, guiding citizens to safe zones, her usual cheeky grin tempered by the seriousness of the moment. She paused briefly, looking at a small group of children watching her in awe. "You lot, promise me you'll look out for each other," she said, her tone soft but firm. "Heroes aren't just people with powers. They're people who care." Genji, sword sheathed for now, moved with measured precision, helping repair makeshift structures, ensuring safety protocols were followed. He had fought supes that could tear steel and stone with the flick of a hand, yet here he found a deeper satisfaction in guiding ordinary people to protect themselves. Meanwhile, Billy Butcher, arms crossed and scowling, observed from a distance. He had seen atrocities, corruption, and lies. He had trusted almost no one. But as he watched Mercy stabilize an injured worker and Tracer coordinate evacuation with fluid efficiency, something in him shifted. A grudging respect surfaced. "Maybe," he muttered to Huey, his voice reluctant. "Maybe real heroes do exist." Huey, nodding, didn't speak, only allowing the weight of the truth to settle. Soldier 76 approached Butcher cautiously. "This world has potential," he said, tone even. "People can stand together if given a chance. But it takes more than courage. It takes guidance, strategy, and yes, heroism." Butcher grunted, unwilling to admit how much he agreed. As the day progressed, Overwatch coordinated the cleanup, restoring order, repairing critical infrastructure, and working to reassure the public that heroism was not synonymous with fear. Every act, every life saved, was a message. There was a different kind of power in this world, one that could not be bought, sold, or controlled. Then, high above the atmosphere, the familiar hum of energy signaled the reactivation of Winston's portal device. The team gathered in a quiet clearing, looking out over a city that was slowly finding its balance. Civilians waved, some with tears in their eyes, some with hesitant smiles. Winston turned to the team, his gaze steady but reflective. "We've done what we could here," he said. "The rest is up to them." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly as he looked toward the shimmering rift. "But one thing I need to know. Did we change this world? Or did this world change us?" Tracer tapped her chronal accelerator lightly, thinking back on the past weeks. The battles, the choices, the civilians risking themselves, the fights with supes who were supposed to be heroes but had been corrupted by power. "Both," she said finally, a grin returning to her face. "And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way." Genji nodded solemnly. "A lesson in humility. A reminder that heroism is earned, not inherited." Mercy added softly, "We can return home. But a part of this world will always stay with us, and we with it." As they prepared to step through the portal, a flicker of red light caught Winston's attention high above the rift. He squinted, realizing someone, or something, was observing them from orbit, far beyond Earth's atmosphere. The figure was silhouetted, yet unmistakable, a being of immense power, unfamiliar, and yet deeply curious about the breach between worlds. Winston's pulse quickened. "We're not alone," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. "Another universe, another threat. They've noticed the rift." The team paused, the magnitude of what lay ahead sinking in. Their journey had already changed one universe, but the multiverse itself had begun to pay attention. Overwatch had made an impact. Yes, but someone, somewhere, was already taking note. Mercy tightened her grip on her staff. Then we'll be ready, she said, voice steady. We always are. And as they stepped through to the portal, leaving the reborn city behind, the red figure lingered in silence, a silent promise that the multiverse had just opened its eyes to Overwatch. The question now hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. How many worlds would this breach reach? And what would they demand when they arrived?